Hello everyone, welcome back to this new session of the Diusa Pet Academy. I am Marco Cavazzoni, veterinary doctor, marine biologist, expert of animal nutrition. I am the scientific director of the Diusa SA Group and the managing director of our Italian factory. Today we are going to speak about a very important, crucial point, which is the label reading. Labels are the most important tools you can have in your hands to make comparison and to highlight the good characteristic of our products compared to our competitors. Let's go now to see and to technically speaking about labels, about details, so that you can make this comparison whenever you want with whatever kind of product. Let's first of all starting to say that we are speaking about extruded pet food. Extruded pet food is characterized to be dry, so it means with a very low level of moisture, and to be complete. On the contrary, wet food and snacks are normally considered to be complementary food. It means that they need to be completed by ingredients or other products to satisfy by themselves all the nutritional needs of the animals. The dry pet food, instead, it is very packed of nutrients. The fact that has just between 7 and 9% of moisture allow all other nutrients to be very concentrated. In fact, we are speaking about a dry matter more or less of 91 to 93%. Protein content between 20, 25 up to 46%, 50%. It means half of the kibble is protein, and then source quantity of fat very high, between 15 and 20%. The rest is carbohydrate. So all extruded pet food need carbohydrate, need starch to act like a glue and keep the kibble in shape. The energy density of those products is very high, typically between 3,800 and 4,200 kilocalories per kilo. So with few kibbles you are able to satisfy the needs of the animals. That's why they become very popular. Of course, inside the market there are a lot of different qualities of pet food, and we can recognize more or less 4 different lines, so 4 different level of quality of pet food. These levels, they don't have a regulatory base, so they are not regulated by the law, but more or less we may speak about economical standard products. These are the, let's say, very most economic, cheap product. They normally are based on very poor quality of raw material in terms of source of protein, meat and bone meals, lot of vegetal source of proteins, lot of whole grains that bring vegetal proteins, and the level of protein is always very modest, very moderate, around 20%. Then we have a modest quality also of fats, very often vegetal oil, very often saturated fats from cow, from pork, which are less expensive but also more stable than chicken fat or fish oil, and especially a very big amount of source of starches. Normally these are grains because they are cheaper. We are speaking about corn, wheat, rarely rice, because rice is a very expensive grain. There is the use of artificial colorants and preservatives. That's why one of the characteristics more for which this segment of pet food is not considered of high quality. Of higher quality, there is the next one, the premium segment. We are speaking now about the most of the products on the market. Products from multinational, very often they are inside the category of premium. They are characterized more or less by the same quantity of protein and fat, around 20% of protein, 8% of fat, but the quality is a little bit higher compared to those of economic standard products. Still, there is a use of vegetal source of protein, vegetal oil, and saturated source of fats. Still, there is also the use of very high quantity of carbohydrate, like grains again. Very often they compose more than 50% of the recipe. Again, in this line, there is possibility to find artificial colorants and preservatives, but not in all products. Upper to this, there are the two top lines of the market. They are super premium and ultra premium. Generally speaking, the multinationals, they arrive to the level of super premium as their gold standard. But as it is our occasion, our situation, we can move to a next step, the ultra premium. What is the characteristic of those products? First of all, the presence of very high amount of meats, of high quality, dehydrated meats, low ash, fresh meat in high quantity. This brings a good quality of the protein, but also a good quantity of the protein. In fact, with the super premium and ultra premium, we never go below the 20% of protein, and we arrive, as we said, up to 50%. Very high level of fats, of high quality, with the fish oil as one of the main fat used, because of its quantity of essential fatty acids omega-3. There is a limited amount of carbohydrate inside. For the super premium, still we are around 40-50% of the recipe. And normally they are classical grains like rice, like corn, but there is also the use of ancestral grains like wheat, like spelt, oats, and so on, brown rice. In the ultra premium, the amount of source of starch is much more limited. We arrive up to 30% of the total formula. This means that the most of the nutrients are from animal origin and are exactly protein and fats, which is what is needed by carnivore animals. Both in super premium and ultra premium is very rare, if not impossible, to have artificial source of colorants and antioxidants. That's why they are normally considered natural products. Speaking about characteristic in terms of composition and quantity of nutrients, we cannot escape in explaining what is the characteristic of what we found in nature. In nature we found 5 elements that compose everything. We find water, as you know, in our body is about 70-75%. We find protein in the second place, fat. We find minerals, and then finally we find carbohydrates. Of course, carbohydrates in the animals are very limited. Just some part of glycogen, some part of glucose, or some DNA can be considered carbohydrate. But of course, inside the vegetal cells, carbohydrate compose most of the cells. So we may speak about those nutrients because they are very important. Moisture, we already say it's one of the most important, but goes beyond our explanation today because we are speaking about dry pet food. The second most important nutrient was protein. Protein in alimentation and nutrition of carnivore animals is of paramount importance because it has 2 different functions. It has the function of being a production of energy through a process called gluconeogenesis, the formation of new glucose. Basically, the amino acid composing the protein are converted into glucose by specific enzymes and pathways inside the carnivore body. That's why we can feed the carnivores with a high level of proteins without risking deficiency in energy. At the same time, proteins are also anabolic substance able to build up muscles, to build up the body, enzymes, hormones, so they are considered essential. What means essential? Essential means that need to be provided with the diet and cannot be synthesized from our body. So more animal is a carnivore, more he will need protein because of essential nutrient. Proteins are composed by amino acids, which in turn can be essential or not essential. There is an amino acid very important for cat nutrition, which is taurine. It's a kind of amino acid that in theory it's not essential for dog, but it's important to integrate in any case. Along with this, we have the source of fat. Source of fat also can be categorized as essential because their main use is providing energy. But then we have the anabolic function and the providing of nutrient function. What are those nutrients? Liposoluble vitamin A, D, E, and K, and essential fatty acids, omega-6, omega-3. The one most important for us are the omega-3 because of anti-inflammatory effect. And we can source them in the fish oil. Actually, one of the trademark of our production is to use fish oil because the unit that contains essential fatty acids already in active form. Those vegetal oil that provide omega-3, they are not providing the omega-3 that dogs and cats can use for their metabolism. Last but not least, the category of carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is a big category of substances that we can broadly distinguish in two main families: the reserve carbohydrate and the structural carbohydrate. The structural carbohydrate are called fiber, and they are what enable plants to stand against the gravity, to stand over the soils. They are lignin, cellulose, hemicellulose. Those three are the main part that contribute, especially cellulose, to the crude fiber that you find on the label. And then there are soluble fiber, able to care about your intestine because the good bacteria can make fermentation of them. They are pectins, gums, mucilaginous substances. When you make confiture, what conglomerate and what make dense the confiture is the soluble fiber that trap water. The other category of carbohydrate, along with the structural, was the reserve carbohydrate. The main reserve carbohydrate of the vegetal cells is the starch. Starch is a chain of simple sugar, and with its digestion, those simple sugar are released and absorbed. More starch is digestible, more quickly this glucose that composes the starch is freed and absorbed into the bloodstream. And quicker is this phase, this process, quicker is the increase of glycemia. That's why we speak about a high glycemic index for those sorts of starches that are highly digestible, like for example rice. The highly digestibility of those starches force the body to produce and release a big amount of insulin that tend to control the amount of glucose in the blood, but also it converts sugars into fat and promote the accumulation of lipids and the overweight and the obesity of pets. On the other hand, we have slowly digestible starch which modulate their absorption into the intestine very much along the day, and so there is no peak that force insulin to act like a lipogenetic hormone, so to convert this sugar into fat. It is a more, let's say, physiological way to give energy to carnivore animals. Said so, I want to highlight the importance of understanding that all ingredients in a formulation, and for ingredients we speak about those items that are listed into the part called composition. All the ingredients bring most of the nutrients. That's why the source of starch is always, or very often when they are entire, they also bring protein, vegetal protein, they bring fat. It is true also that the source of protein bring fat, they bring mineral and vitamins, much less carbohydrates of course, but what is important is to have very clear in mind and to not mismatch what is ingredient, source of nutrient, and what is nutrient that is listed into the analytical values. There is a nutrient we said that it's not essential to those animals because in general it is used just to provide energy. It's the starch. But starch being not essential, also it doesn't have to be expressed on the label. So most of the labels, they just don't list it. But it's very important because as we saw, a real ultra premium cannot have more than 30-35% of starch. So how to calculate the amount of starch in the moment where it's not written on the label. It's very clear, very easy. We said at the beginning that everything in nature is composed by 5 things: moisture, protein, fat, carbohydrates and minerals. What do you have in your label? You have moisture, you have protein, you have fat, you have the minerals in form of ash, and then what it's missing is exactly carbohydrate. We said that carbohydrates divide in fiber and starch. You have the crude fiber, it only means into the label the starch plus soluble fiber. So by a simple subtraction from the 100%, the total of the kibble, the 5 main elements of the label, you will have as a result the starch plus the soluble fiber. You can consider everything starch, or you can consider the soluble fiber equal in quantity to the crude fiber of the label, and by final subtraction you also have the real source of starch. And with this you can very easily make the comparison between our product and competitors' product. But we are so transparent that in our holistic we just didn't need to make you make the calculation. The amount of starch, as well as other voluntary declaration like sodium, it's already listed into the label, where in the analytical values. So here you see the European label of our Chicken Puppy Mini Holistic. It is the very top of the top product in which we distinguish the 3 main parts of the label. The composition, as we said, the list of ingredients. Ingredients are always, for the principle of the mixing bowl, listed from the one present in higher quantity to the one present in the smallest quantity before the thermic treatment, before the cooking. That's why the fresh meat is still declared as fresh meat and not after cooking when the water is removed. Said so, you may take a look to our label and you will see that the first 3 ingredients are meats, among which also the fresh meat. The last of the 3 ingredients, in this case the dehydrated duck, it's at 10%. It means, for the principle of the mixing bowl, that everything what comes later, it's maximum 10%. Now, let's take a look to which are the possible other source of proteins, because as we said, they are carnivore, they need the protein from animal origin. What are the other source of proteins? The unique ones can be potato, sweet potato, or the pea starch. But the pea starch is a starch, so it's just the glue for the kibble, it's just the low glycemic index source of carbohydrate. The sweet potato, it's an entire sweet potato. Sweet potato contains more or less 5% of, maximum 5% of protein. If it is used in an amount which is maximum 10%, because it cannot be more since the previous ingredient is at 10%, the 5% of 10% is 0.5. 0.5 is then the quantity of protein brought by the sweet potato. Let's take the total quantity of protein brought by all the meats and also the other source of proteins. In this product is 38%. Let's subtract the 0.5 from the 38% to obtain 37.5%. It means that out of 38%, 37.5 are proceeding from meat and 0.5 are proceeding from vegetable. It's not a chance if our protein are the most complete in the market. Then we can take a look to the very high quality level of fat. You see that the fat is high here. It's 22% because it's a puppy, so it needs fat and energy to grow up and move and play. But let's see what are the characteristics of this fat. You see that the unique source of fat in our label are chicken fat and fish oil. You see that there is no saturated source of fat like pork, beef. There is no vegetal source of fat. So already from the quality of the ingredients, you understand that these fats are very high quality, very rich in essential fatty acids. But you have a real dimension of it when you look in the analytical values. So the sum of all our fat brought by the meat ingredients, by the source of fat, makes possible the quantity of omega-3 that you see that are very, very high. And especially in a puppy product, it's very important because the DHA is part of the brain cells of the puppies, so it's important during the development, also for the training and the learning. But omegas are very important also for the adults because they care about skin, about articulation, in general about all the anti-inflammatory systems. Then we can take a look into the composition to the several sources of fibers that are important for the intestine to allow a better digestion of nutrients, a better health of the intestine, to displace the bad pathogens like it is the case of the Brewer cyst, and all the phytonutrients that we explain in another session of this training. All of this is complemented by a very evolute amount and variety of additives that are nutritional additives. So in the third part of the label you see the additives per kilo, every kind of vitamin and minerals. In this case minerals, they are linked, they are carried by an amino acid which is a component of the protein, so important for the body that they would give preferential absorption route. In this way, this amino acid is carrying together with him also the mineral to which is attached. Not only, this is the most integrated pet food on the market, also because our safety approach. As you know, a few years ago there was a scandal in the United States with dogs fed with boutique grain-free that developed a pathology called dilated cardiomyopathy. For preventing this, despite the very high amount of protein from animal origin, we integrate in all our dog formulas taurine. Taurine in an amount that is sufficient to feed a cat safely, 1000 milligrams per kilo. Along with this, we are using the highest amount of carnitine, which is able to promote the usage of fat in an amount that is 4 or 5 times the prescription diet for weight reduction of the competitors. This is once more the proof of the completeness and of the product which is one of the most evolute in the market. Said so, I thank you very much for your attention and I give you appointment for the next session of our DIUSA Pet Academy training. Stay tuned on DIUSA.